What are you doing, honey?
Duking.
Right in front of us?
You know we have our own bathrooms now.
Hello and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, the podcast all about animated features not made by Disney. I'm your host, Octaviano Macias, and today I honestly didn't really know what to talk about. I was kind of like, should I do something big? Should I do something more foreign? Well, what should I do? And by luck, while I was looking around the various streaming services, I found a movie that I remember seeing come out last year. Didn't really watch because I was just like, I'm not a fan of this stuff. But I figured this time, why not? You know, I recently did the Beavis and Butthead episode where I mentioned that was a movie that I had seen before even watching the show, and I ended up enjoying. So I figured, okay, let me try that with something else, something that's past my time, if you want to put it that way. Something for younger kids that's gotten some, a pretty good representation. Pretty good reception is what I mean. And I figured, okay, fine, let me watch the Loud House movie. Now, the Loud House, if you're unaware of it, to be honest, I don't know if I can really sell it well, given that I'm not really a fan of the show. I've never really seen it. This is the first thing I've ever seen regarding the show, at least in terms of like actual clips and stuff like that, because I've seen at least the drawings and stuff like that before. Like the closest I've come to seeing these characters in motion prior to this was they were in like the Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl. It's pretty much like their version of Super Smash Bros. And they were like the most recent characters represented in that whole game. Like they had the main character Lincoln Loud and his I believe it's his younger sister Lucy Loud, who's like this little goth vampire type chick. But yeah, that's pretty much what I like. That was the first time I saw those characters in motion, which is not really a proper way to see it since it's a video game, so that's different from what you would normally see on the show itself. But that's the gist of it. So yeah, I saw the characters do that, and I had no real knowledge other than this was a show about a boy and a family with a bunch of girls. Apparently all the girls are pretty much in the mold of like almost every single girl stereotype that you've ever seen in a cartoon like this. Looking at it from that way, I'm like, okay, I get to have an idea of what to expect. And for the most part, I got what I expected out of this, but at the same time, there was some stuff where I'm like, is that a thing that happens in the show? This feels a bit off, which, okay, just to give you an idea of what the movie is about. So, for the most part, you don't have to watch the show to get the movie. It's pretty much like, okay, here's this family called the Loud family. Mom met dad. Dad got mom pregnant several times to the point that I'm like, oh, slow down, guys, slow down. But yeah, like they got that going on. You got pretty much one daughter, two daughter, eventually a whole line of daughters, and then at some point a boy, and then more daughters. So pretty much you got all the girls are like gifted and stuff, like singing, doing stand-up routines, being scientists, all that stuff. Like each girl is talented in something. But then you have the main character Lincoln Loud, who is pretty much like he helps around, but he feels like he's left out from everything. Like he's not really special. So I was like, okay, I've seen this general story before. Like the guy who doesn't think they're special, and like it's fine for what it's done. It's honestly my biggest issue on the movie, which I'll talk about more in a bit, is that for as much as that seems to be the main issue and the driving reason for the plot, Lincoln doesn't really confront it all that much with his sisters. Like, he does mention it towards the end, but it's like, okay, we brushed it aside to the point that it could have been over within minutes. by going by that logic. When realistically, the story, it feels like it should be a movie, and it feels like that should have been more of like the emotional draw to it, but they don't explore it enough, and I don't know if that's a thing with TV nowadays where there's so much restriction in what they can and can't do, or if that was always just the way they explored it. Because I know that in some areas they've gotten more strict with children's TV. Other areas they've loosened up, so that's good. Like, I know, at least from what I've heard on this show, is that there's a lot of LGBT representation, which is great. I don't see it in the movie. I don't know if that's because it's supposed to be a movie. It was not theatrical. It was a Netflix feature, and I don't know if it was ever intended to be theatrical because, well, the animation is a step up from what I would assume is the TV animation. Like, there is a little bit more than what I normally see with a TV show. The coloring, not so much. Like, it does. Like, I know they make jokes about this, especially recently with the Bob's Burgers trailer, where it was like, oh, there's like the movie, cartoon movie coloring. Like, because you'll see more shadows and stuff like that. And yeah, it's true. It's kind of funny when you look at it that way, but it is true. Like, you would normally see more shadows on it because they now have the budget to do that kind of stuff. You don't really see that here. Like, occasionally there's moments where it's like, okay, that's a bit different than what I would see in the coloring of a show, but not by much. Like, it's really just in the movement that I notice, like, okay, there's some difference here, but even then, it's still not by much, because, that's the other thing that a lot of people don't really seem to notice. Like, it's not even just the coloring that changes, it's like the angles that you see these characters in, and just the motion of it that makes it really different. But like I said, it's not a bad, it's well done. It's just that it's not that different from it. So I don't know if it was ever intended to be a theatrical thing, with COVID being a thing, and also even before that, streaming has kind of advanced the way we tell stories, because there's a lot of movies, whether it was during the COVID era or even before the COVID era, where you would notice that the movies being put out was not the same as like when we were just getting straight to video movies, where it's like, yeah, some of these could legit be theatrical movies, based on the quality of how they look, the story, and everything. Like, it feels like there's actual effort and time being put into these things. So, not really sure on that front. I know, like, when they have like the opening logo for Nickelodeon movies, I mean, that kind of stuff would only be for the theatrical features. But again, I don't know how this was intended to be, because yeah, the animation doesn't fully look like a theatrical feature. But then again, I don't know, maybe it was, it's just that they didn't give it much of a budget. I don't know. But I bring that up because, yeah, like, just looking at it with the way they handle it is like, I don't know, is that a thing that TV shows nowadays have to struggle with? Just like the idea of having representation of certain topics? Because when it comes to a lot of shows, I've heard that apparently you can't even really have bullies on a lot of these cartoons because they're like, oh, it's, bullying is bad and whatnot, which I'm like, yeah, but I mean, it's fine to have it sometimes just to kind of give an obstacle for a character. Like, I get it, things have changed, and just going with the stereotypical bully is not a very good look, but it is something that could help a story every now and then. But realistically, that wasn't even what I had an issue with in this story. It's just the idea that this character felt lonely and like they didn't really matter, but the movie never really goes into it too much. Like, it's pretty much like the driving force behind him going over to Scotland, because the family pretty much goes to Scotland because Lincoln gets the idea of like, oh, if I meet my family or our ancestry, I'll find out something I'm special at, which is them finding out that they're actually from royalty, and Lincoln's closest mirror relative ancestor was a duke. Which, a quick aside, I kind of hate it when shows do this, where it's like, okay, let's show the ancestors, and they all look the same as like the current characters. Like one or two is fine, especially if it's the main character, because it's like, okay, you know, I get it. Sometimes you do have those ancestors that really do look like you, but the fact that everyone looks like it, like, you know, they have like an exact mirror to each family member and whatnot. It's like, come on, guys. Like, I know this is a cartoon, but you could have gotten a little more creative with the designs. Like, this just reeks of just being lazy and just being like, okay, you know, kids will get this. And it's like, I don't know. It just always struck me as weird. I know it's more of a nitpick. I especially hate it when it's like, hey, look, even the mom looks the same as like the old mom, and I'm like, you know, if this is coming from the father's side, like, is this like an incestuous relationship? Did they not know that they're secretly related to each other? The fact that they're that close, so I don't know. I've never really liked it when they do that, like the old, like, oh, these are the ancestors and they all look exactly like the family of now. One or two being like that is fine, but overall, like the fact that all of them do is like, come on. But anyway, so yeah, you got that whole thing. David Tennant's in this, so, you know, that's your closest you get to a celebrity voice. I think. I could be wrong. I might be forgetting someone, but it doesn't feel like I'm forgetting anyone. But then again, he's become a regular in voice acting. Like, he's been Scrooge McDuck for DuckTales for years, so, you know, whatever. He's fine in it. It's just more or less just, he's like the groundskeeper who, of course, eventually becomes worthy of ruling the place, and you can kind of see that plot line playing out, especially because, like, the whole thing with the movie is like, okay, they're gonna stay in Scotland, but you know they're not. But then you have, like, the maid who, I guess, turns out that she was the reason, well, her ancestor was the reason why. Which, see, that's the thing. You get the maid whose ancestor looks kind of like her, but looks different from her. So it's like, again, so you put time and effort for her design, but not when it came to the family of this. And it's like, I don't know, I just kind of hate it. Especially because the only one that, you know, like, regarding the Loud family that made sense to make him look like the characters that, you know, we see was just Lincoln. Because it's like, okay, well, he's trying to match up to this family member who was a duke. And then you have Lucy, who actually interacts with her old ancestor because she pretty much brings her back from the dead as a ghost. And I'm just like, is this a thing that happens in the show often? Because eventually there's also dragons and magic in this, but I thought this was just a normal family show, but whatever. I'm not too bothered by it. Honestly, the movie is fine. It's not great. It's not one that that makes me want to watch the whole show, but, you know, it is fine for what it is. But it's just one of those things that's weird. But again, I get why you would make that character look exactly like, you know, the Lucy character. Everyone else just feels like, okay, you're just being lazy on this. Now, in regards to the whole family itself, honestly, that's one of those areas where I'm like, yeah, even if I had no idea that this was a show, I would probably figure it's a show, given that all the sisters have very distinct personalities, even though they're pretty much stereotypes of girl characters that you've seen before. You don't get enough screen time with any of them to fully flesh them out, aside from the Lucy character, the little goth girl, and the baby. Though even the baby kind of annoyed me, just because most of the time she's just there to spat out phrases, and it's just like, it's supposed to be cute, but half the time I'm just like, okay, I get it. It's not even funny. I mean, I guess kids might like it. I don't know. I don't know. I just feel like this is more condescending than anything. And maybe it's better in the show, so I don't know. But that's the thing, is that you could definitely tell that it would be a show, because these characters all have distinct personalities, but you don't get enough of it in the movie to where it's like, I don't know. Like, you get a few that have their jokes. Like, you have the two older sisters, which kind of blend for me, because they're both essentially like girly girls. It's just different types of that. And you got one who's like, oh, she thinks everyone in Scotland is named Scott because they're in Scotland, which, okay, that's fine. And she meets up with a boy. You get a few, not really minutes, it's more like seconds with that, and it's fine. Then you got the other one who early on is talking to her boyfriend, and it sets up a joke where he's like going to Scotland to basically reunite with her because, it's the whole, the reception is bad. So she says something that makes him think that they're breaking up or whatever. And it's like, okay, I know where this joke is coming in. I know where the movie's going to end. He's going to show up in Scotland, but he's already missed the girl. That's how the movie ends. Spoiler alert, but realistically, if you saw this, you would have known it right away. And that's fine. It's just, I didn't really care too much. It at least gives them something more to do. Like, you got the science girl who is pretty much just there just early on just to kind of set up, like, okay, this is why they go to Scotland, because the father is completely unaware of his side of the family. You got some twins that don't really do too much on it other than you see one's like a princess type of girl and the other one's more of a tomboy. You got a rocker girl who plays some instruments and it sets up a scene, but I don't know, it's a lot of characters to a point that it's like, yeah, with an 80-minute movie, it was not going to be able to properly showcase each character. So, like in the show, they definitely expand on each one because they have more time with more episodes to focus on each individual girl. And yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it's not horrible. Like, none of them really bother me, except I do get annoyed with the baby, though. Every now and then it's fine, I guess. I mean, the ending, the climax reminded me of the Simpsons movie where the baby comes in to save the day, kind of like how Maggie saves the day in the Simpsons movie, but it was better in the Simpsons movie. But yeah, I mean, it's not a bad movie. It's just one where it's like, yeah, I can tell this was a show, and there's certain aspects that feel like, I don't know, is that a restraint because this is intended to be a TV movie, or is that a restraint because this was intended to be theatrical and certain things? Like, going back to that, like, the main push-pull on why it could have been one way or the other is, like, in terms of it being theatrical, the fact that they don't really highlight any of the LGBT representation that I've heard the show has a lot of. Like, there's absolutely no mention, and maybe they don't do it that often in the show either. I don't know. I've never actually seen it. I just heard it a lot, so I was assuming that it would be, like, in there enough so that you would see it here, but it doesn't, and I'm, like, assuming that that's a result of this being theatrical. It's probably because, like, realistically, even though it's gotten better, if we're completely honest, when it comes to theatrical stuff, they do still tend to hold back unless it's literally like an R-rated feature, maybe a PG-13 at most, but they do tend to hold back, especially for family stuff, for a reason. Not a very good reason, but it is a reason. But then it could be a TV thing, because I feel like the whole reason for everything going on with Lincoln feeling like he's alone and like not special, not being fully addressed feels like something that they would pull on TV because they're like, oh, well, we don't want the kids to feel too sad, or we don't want to go head first into this kind of stuff in a show that's directed at kids. Like, I know some people will probably mention, like, oh, but I've seen that happen in a few shows. Like, yeah, but normally those shows are given like a PG rating, whereas this is definitely a Y7 rating. Like, that's what Netflix rates it at. So again, I don't know if it was just intended to be a TV movie that they just put on Netflix, just because I know that Netflix did get some good numbers out of some of their other stuff, like Invader Zim and Rockers Modern Life, when they did like specials or movies out of them recently. So I don't know if that was the intention, but yeah, it feels weird. Like, even the villain at some point, like the maid, she tries to play upon Lincoln feeling like he's lonely and whatnot. And yeah, it kind of gets into that, but it's so little and very much towards the end that it doesn't really affect it much. Like, you'd think, and fine, I guess I should be glad that it doesn't take the normal route, but at the same time, sometimes you take those routes because it's what works best for these kinds of stories, and I feel like that would have had more of an emotional impact than what we get. Because you get the whole idea of, like, okay, she's gonna try to make Lincoln more of a jerk. He's gonna basically get full of himself, and maybe he's gonna push away his family unintentionally, or maybe intentionally. But instead, it's like, okay, all it really is just him being convinced to ride around a dragon, and she uses a spell to basically control a dragon while he's trying to get attention with it. And it's like, I mean, did you really need to set up the whole distrust thing with the family on that? Like, wouldn't it have been better if him being cruel was basically with the family, taking away attention from him, like, him actually, trying to show off, still not getting attention, and then eventually accidentally in front of everyone in town, acting out and basically calling out the sisters, wrongfully. That would have been way. It would have been like, okay, yeah, the town sees him as a jerk, the family is kind of mad at him and whatnot, but I guess you kind of have to rush it. So, have to have him on the dragon, have him accidentally destroy stuff, but not really, while the family still supports him, is, I guess, the way to go. Like, one of the characters early on, like his best friend, who basically puts the idea to go to this place, or at least find his family, even, points out early on, it's like, dude, you are special. Like, you've won several competitions, you're pretty good at singing, and all this stuff. You can ease up on not feeling special. Like, just let your sisters have a moment to shine. And it's like, yeah. And granted, I don't mind it too much that that's not where the movie ends, because he is a kid, so of course he's, gonna ignore that. It's just that, with the way the movie ends up handling it, where it's like very easy to resolve without going too much into the emotional depths, I guess you could say, of it. It's just like, yeah, maybe that should have, like, normally speaking, it shouldn't, because again, he's a kid, he's immature, and it allows for him to grow. But I don't know, it's what it is. I mean, it really is a kid's show that I've never seen. I mean, at times I kind of felt like this must be how it's like when you're an adult watching a show with your kid that you've never heard of. Like, it's not something that you grew up with, because of course it's a new original-ish thing that wasn't in your time. So you're kind of like, wait, what are they talking about? That's kind of what it felt like at times, but not by much. For the most part, the movie is fine. I'm not against it. The music on it is not great, but it's not bad, which is why I haven't really been talking about it, because I just generally have no feelings towards it. And I mean, some of it I can remember, but mostly on the visual part, in terms of the actual singing, can't remember any of it, but I also can't remember hating any of it, so it's just kind of there. The voice acting is fine. I mean, it's a bunch of professional voice actors with David Tennant. I will say I did kind of get disappointed on something with the movie, because there's one thing it did right, in my opinion, and then they backtrack on it during the credits, which is when it comes to the villain, she eventually, runs the Loud family out, and it's something that apparently her ancestor did too, which I was kind of like, again, this kind of feels like something that it would be on TV because of that, because when you get the ancestors, like, the reason why they left town is because her ancestor also controlled the dragon, who, the dragon pretty much scared off, and the family is just like, okay, well, I guess we're not wanted here if the dragon doesn't want us here, and they just leave. But the way it's set up, it's almost like, especially considering that when you see the ghosts of the ancestor family, you would assume that they got killed, because it's like, well, why else are the kids showing up as kids instead of however, they lived out their lives? But no, they just leave and just never return. So it's like, okay. And then, the villain pretty much does the same thing, though with hers it makes more sense, since they willingly leave, because it's like, okay, Lincoln's been disgraced, the town hates him, so it's like, okay, it's fine, the way it's set up there. And eventually she goes full on crazy, like, she tries saying, like, oh yeah, Lincoln gave me the crown and I became the ruler, and pretty much no one buys it, and she's like, okay, yeah, I was just slang, I just wanted to do it the nice way. and just goes full on tyrant. So it's like, okay, so this is going bad. This is going really bad. And once she's defeated, the dragon pretty much drops her off in some island. Well, not really even a line. It was just an island. It was more like a pile of rocks to, we assume to live out the rest of her life. And it's like, okay, this feels kind of appropriate. It's not a full-on death, but it is kind of like in the mold of like classic Disney or family features where it's like the villain gets their comeuppance, and it is like a bad situation. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. That's something that you would see in a well-done movie. But then it backtracks it because after when the credits start, you see like little sequences of what happens later on, and you see the villain. Basically, they pick her up, so it was more like a timeout, and she starts working in the castle again. And I'm like, you could have just left her there. No one would really care. Like, you don't have to be this nice about it every now and then. It's like the lady was trying to destroy a whole town just for peace and quiet, and she's evil. She doesn't need a short redemption, like, which again makes it feel like something that might have been for TV because they, when it comes to movies that go into theaters, that kind of stuff is not a worry. But when it comes to ones on TV, that would be more questionable. So you would have to put that in. So I don't know. I really don't know. But I've been saying the movie was fine. As something that I've never seen before, I enjoyed it just fine. I'm not going to really bother watching the show because I've got a bunch of other stuff that I got to watch. It's not really a slight against the show. I mean, if I had the time, I would probably check out a few episodes. But honestly, there's a lot of stuff that I have yet to see. I haven't seen Stranger Things, and at this point, I don't think I'll ever see Stranger Things. But, it is what it is. So, yeah, I enjoyed it. It's fine. It's great. Not really great. It's just fine. But I enjoyed it. So, for what it's worth, if you want to see something cute, the Loud House movie is there on Netflix. It's an enjoyable sit-through. If you're a fan of the show, you've probably already seen it, but if you haven't, I'm sure you'll get more out of this than I would. But otherwise, yeah, that's all I can really say about the show. About the movie, it's fine. It's good. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, please consider going on to YouTube and subscribing. My channel is Secondhand Films. If you're watching this as a video, then you're probably already here, so just subscribe right there. If you're listening to it, just go over and click on that subscribe button. And if you want to support me even more, there is Patreon. It's on www.patreon.com/psychams. Supporting me, get your name on the videos, and it just helps me live. It helps me financially. It helps me work towards these videos. So, it helps. You could do $1, you could do more. It's up to you. Otherwise, this has been Octaviano Macias, host of I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you next time.
Hey, Scott!
Why are you calling everyone Scott?
We're in Scotland. Duh.